Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. Naruto Uzumaki Senju. Tsunade read before sighing as she knelt down, tracing her finger over the gravestone that had been laid in honor of the memory of her husband. The memory of his death still fresh in her mind as pictures of his wounded form charging towards Hanzo played over and over again in her head, wondering why in Kami's name had she allowed him to sacrifice himself so she, Jiraiya and Orochimaru could escape and live. Kasen. Tsunade heard a soft voice call out, breaking her from her thoughts as she stood up and turned to look at her daughter Kushina, whose eyes had watered looking at her father's grave. Minato-kun and I have decided to name the baby Nawaki Naruto Uzumaki Senju if it's a boy, or Tokumito Uzumaki Senju if it's girl. If that's okay with you. Tsunade couldn't help smile as she gazed at the beautiful red-haired woman in front of her who'd been the product of her love for Naruto, now 8 months pregnant and ready to bring her own child into the world. I would love that very much, Kushina-chan. The names sound perfect for my granddaughter or grandson. Tsunade commented, smiling at Kushina. I knew you would like them, Databane. Kushina said enthusiastically, happy to have made her mother smile, knowing how hard today was for her. Tsunade couldn't help but chuckle at her daughter's enthusiasm. She truly was her father's daughter, having inherited his violet eyes, red hair, and even Naruto's mother Toka Senju's verbal tick. Do you think he would have been proud of me? Kushina shyly asked, her enthusiasm fading as she inquired about the one thing about her father that she had always truly wanted to know but never had the courage to ask. Tsunade sighed, a distant look overcoming her features as her mind drifted to the night she and Naruto found out she was pregnant and the ecstatic way he had reacted. Your father loved you since the day he learned I was pregnant with you, Kushina-chan, and I'm more than certain he would have been proud to call you his daughter. Tsunade answered sincerely as she drew her daughter into a comforting hug, knowing that this day was just as hard for her despite the fact that the younger woman had been born after her father's death. Thank you, Kasen. Kushina thanked, her voice breaking as she heard the words that meant so much to her. How about we get some ramen? Tsunade asked, wanting to lighten the mood. Giggling as she saw her daughter's excited reaction from hearing the word ramen, just like her father would. Kasen, can you tell me how you and Tsunade meet? Kushina asked curiously, realizing she had never heard that story before despite having heard so much about her father Naruto from her mother. Well, Tsunade began, her mind drifting to the day she had met Naruto. Flashback. So Tsunade, any idea why Sensei called us here? A 12-year-old Jiraiya asked, wanting to start a conversation with his beautiful blonde teammate. I don't know, Jiraiya, Tsunade answered with a forced politeness, wanting to snap at the dobe of their team but stopping herself as she remembered Hiruzen's words that she had to be nicer to her teammates if she wanted to grow as a ninja, since they would be the very people who had her back and who she relied on when they went into the field or on dangerous missions. Jiraiya called to Orochimaru, wanting to embarrass him in front of Tsunade. Any idea why Sensei called us here? Jiraiya asked, grinning, sure his teammate would react to being called. Before frowning as Orochimaru shrugged, ignoring him. Team 7, you're here, good. A deep familiar voice said that Team 7 knew belonged to their sensei, turning their attention to their sensei Hiruzen, who approached them from the edge of the training ground, a red-haired boy behind him. There is someone I would like you to meet. Your new teammate Naruto. Hiruzen announced before turning to the boy behind him. Come forward, Naruto, there's no need to be shy. Hiruzen gently encouraged, gesturing to the boy behind him who shyly stood next to the Junin. The boy glancing at Orochimaru and Jiraiya before looking at Tsunade, who was staring at him intently, causing the boy to grow nervous and turn his glance away as an embarrassed blush spread across his cheeks. Tsunade frowned as she stared at the boy her sensei said would be placed in their team. From what she could see, she was not impressed. The boy seemed ordinary, shy and boring. Tsunade was sure she would want nothing to do with him, just like she wanted nothing to do with her other two teammates Jiraiya and Orochimaru. Flashback end. Suyu and Tucson never spoke that day. Kushina asked, a smile playing on her lips as she listened to her mother. No, I barely said more than 1 or 2 words to him for months after that, and each time he tried to approach me he would shyly blush and run away. Tsunade answered, her voice full of emotion as she remembered days she and Naruto had been distant in their genin days. Him shy and reserved, her spoiled and snobbish. He kind of reminds me a bit of Minato-kun, Kushina said, remembering how her husband Minato Namikaze kept watching her as though he wanted to say something but didn't approach her until she was kidnapped by Kumo Nin. We're here, Kushina announced, her mode bubbly as she excitedly made her way forward to meet the Ichirakus, the ramen cooking family that didn't treat her as the daughter of the great Tsunade Senju and the legendary Naruto Uzumaki Senju, but rather as Kushina, a ramen-loving customer. Hey Oji-san. Kushina greeted her favorite ramen chief, leaving behind her mother who stood at the stand entrance, a sad smile on her face as she remembered the times she and Naruto had eaten here. 1 month later. Night of the Kyuubi attack. I'm sorry sensei, but I have to leave, there's too much pain from me here. Tsunade croaked, her throat raw and her eyes red as she stood by the village gates in front of Hiruzen, who was trying to reason with her. And what about you, granddaughter Tsunade-chan? Hiruzen asked, his emotionally broken student gesturing to the bundle he held. She has no one. Her mother just died, her father too. Toka needs you. I'm sorry sensei, but she would be better off without me, Tsunade answered, her eyes watering again as she looked at the whiskered face of her granddaughter. Everyone I have ever loved has died because of me, Naruto, Nawaki, now Kushina. My love is a curse sensei, nothing good can come from me loving this girl. Hiruzen sighed as he watched his student walk away from the village, wondering if letting her go in her current state was a good thing or a bad thing. 11 years later. Toka Uzumaki smirked as she finished learning the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu from the forbidden jutsu scroll she stolen from the Hokage's office. Her heart pounded in excitement as she stared at the list of other advanced jutsu she could learn to impress Mizuki and graduate early from the academy, bringing her a step closer to becoming Hokage and earning the acknowledgement and respect of everyone around her. Toka, you brought the scroll, I see. Toka heard from behind her, causing her eyes to widen in fright, before calming down as she recognized Mizuki. Hi sensei, Toka answered, proudly grinning at Mizuki as she recalled his promise of early graduation if she retrieved the scroll and learned a jutsu from it. Toka, Mizuki began, darkly eager to reveal his plans of using the girl and the reason why the village hated her, but stopped as he felt a massive spike in chakra that matched that of the Kyuubis the night of the attack 11 years ago. Mizuki-sensei, Toka said, frightened, looking to her sensei as she felt the incredible power surge in front of her, not knowing what was going on and looking at the instructor for help. What's going on? Toka asked, her voice laced with an undeniable fear. Hokage Tower. Can you feel that, Hokage-sama? Yugao asked, her body stiffening as she felt a mammoth of a chakra spike, surging from the forest just outside of the village. Toka, Hiruzen said, worryingly ignoring the Anbu agent Neko as he feared that something had happened to Toka, resulting in her releasing the Kyuubi, thus explaining the massive chakra surge he could feel. Bolting out the office window, the Hokage wasted no time as he pushed his legs to the limit and ran in the direction of the surge, removing his Hokage robes that slowed him down as he did, revealing his battle gear underneath. Neko. Hiruzen called out to the Anbu agent, struggling to keep up to him as he jumped from one rooftop to the next. I need you to s. Hiruzen began ordering Yugao on what to do, but stopped as a blinding light flashed from the direction where the surge came before a deafening explosion followed it. Toka, Hiruzen thought worryingly as his senses returned to him, his orders to Yugao long forgotten as he used his chakra-enhanced speed to swiftly arrive at the location of the explosion, leaving behind a frightened Yugao who continued her chase of the fast-moving Hokage. Toka. Hiruzen yelled, his eyes frantically searching the area where he thought the explosion came from. Hokage-sama. An Anbu agent yelled, turning Hiruzen's attention to an area in the distance where several shinobi gathered. Toka-chan. Hiruzen called out, relieved as he spotted the girl he had made it his personal mission to protect. Gigi. Toka called back, pushing past the shinobi who had surrounded her, hounding her with questions as she moved to her grandfather figure. What happened, Toka-chan? Are you okay? Hiruzen asked as he pulled the frightened girl into a hug. I don't know, Gigi. Toka answered truthfully, pulling back from Hiruzen. Her mind a blur as she tried to process what had happened moments before the Hokage arrived. I felt this weird and scary feeling in front of me before there was this bright flash and loud bang. Toka frantically explained, but the Hokage managed to catch everything. And when the light was gone, I opened my eyes. There was no Mizuki-sensei but a man wearing this funny black sway. Mizuki-sensei. Funny black suit. Toka wa? Hiruzen questioned but was interrupted by an Anbu agent who respectfully bowed in front of him. Hokage-sama. The man said respectfully. I think you really need to see this. The man added, gesturing to where the group of Anbu and Junin stood staring at something in shock. Seeing the Hokage approach, the crowd respectfully parted, granting the Hokage access to the center of the gathered shinobi, where Hiruzen's eyes fell onto something that nearly gave him a heart attack. There in the middle of a small crater lay a young man with a mane of wild red hair. The man wore bits of black Senju armor that seemed severely damaged and had multiple wounds that covered a large amount of his muscular body. Naruto. Hiruzen whispered, his being filled with shock as he ignored the multiple grasps that sounded from the ninja around him who had heard the name he said. Slowly Hiruzen approached the injured form of his supposedly dead student and knelt over it, roaming his eyes over the body, making sure it wasn't an illusion or a lookalike of some sort. Standing up, Hiruzen morphed his face into an impassive expression as he remembered he was the Hokage and need to act like one before barking out orders to ensure the survival of his student and the safety of his village. Several days later. Tanzaku Town. Tsunade sighed as she lost another large amount of her own personal money, making sure to remain away from the Senju and Uzumaki accounts that she had left for her granddaughter Toka. Cash me out, Tsunade said as she glanced at the tiny pile of chips she had gathered in front of her, wondering why she had bothered to come here in the first place, leaving with less money than she had going in. I can see that you are still living up to your name of being the legendary Harem. A perverted voice said from behind her, causing Tsunade to sigh as she instantly recognized whose voice it was. Jiraiya, what are you doing here? Tsunade asked, her voice agitated as she took a swing from her sake cup. Sensei sent me. Jiraiya answered, his voice losing its playfulness as he sat next to her. What does he want with me? Tsunade asked, thinking of the man she had been secretly grateful to for sending her messages that Toka was doing okay over the past 11 years. He needs you to come back to the village, Tsunade. Jiraiya answered, noticing his teammate's fists tightening in anger. Why? Tsunade asked between clenched teeth, wondering what had changed her sensei's mind when he had respected her wishes all these years ago. I don't know how else to say this, so I am just going to say it. Jiraiya said, pausing as he braced himself for Tsunade's reaction. Naruto is somehow alive. Jiraiya told Tsunade, who swiftly turned wide-eyed to Jiraiya. But he's dying and needs your help to save him. Tsunade anxiously paced up and down outside the Hokage's office, waiting for the meeting her sensei said he needed to have with her teammate to end so she could see her dying husband. Having seen the villagers' reaction to her return and their not-so-subtle whispers about Naruto, Tsunade knew what Jiraiya had said was true. Naruto was indeed alive and lying somewhere dying in the village. What's taking so long? Tsunade yelled, having grown frustrated at being forced to wait before she could see Naruto. Having had enough, Tsunade stopped pacing and prepared to kick the down and demand to see Naruto, but a loud obnoxious yell caught her attention. Gigi. The blonde heard before grasping is a girl that could only be described as a mini Kushina with whisker marks, bolted to the Hokage's office door and kicked it open. Gigi. The girl yelled again, ignoring the blonde woman that stood frozen as she ran into the Hokage's office. Toka-chan, what are doing here? Hiruzen asked. His meeting with Jiraiya interrupted as he stood up to greet the excited girl in front of him. Shami-sensei kicked me out of class again, so I came to ask if we could go get some ramen. Toka explained, earning a frown from the old Hokage. He did. Hiruzen asked, a dangerous edge in his voice as he made a note to have a few words with Mizuki's replacement, who had warned Bin not to follow the traitor's example in neglecting Toka. Hi. Toka answered honestly, eagerly nodding her head as Hiruzen wondered why Iruka hadn't stopped him. So can we go get some ramen? Hiruzen chuckled as he gazed down at the girl who was looking at him expectantly, knowing that he should have guessed the girl wanted to go on an all-expenses-free ramen binge. I'm busy right now, Toka-chan, and you should be in the academy learning, Hiruzen told the Uzumaki girl, causing her to frown and immediately begin a long chain of protests. But this is my former student Jiraiya. The Hokage continued, ending Toka's protests as he gestured to the man across from him, turning the girl's attention to a tall man with a large mane of white hair. He would be more than happy to take you to get some ramen. Hiruzen added, knowing he didn't have the time to take Toka back to the academy with the more pressing issue of Naruto hanging over his head. Wouldn't you, Jiraiya-kun? Hiruzen asked, ordered his student as he discreetly tilted his head to Tsunade, who still stood frozen watching Toka. Of course, sensei, I would love to take Toka-chan to get some ramen. Jiraiya said, smiling at the 11-year-old girl as he caught his sensei's message that Tsunade was not ready to meet Toka and he needed to get the young girl out of here before the two interacted. Bye, Gigi. I will see you later, Dattebyo. Toka yelled, waving at the Hokage before dragging Jiraiya with her out of the office towards Ichiraku's. She really is something, Hiruzen commented moments later as he moved to stand next to his student, watching Jiraiya and Toka leave. She is, Tsunade whispered, her voice filled with regret as she watched the retreating form of the girl she abandoned 11 years ago. Tsunade, Hiruzen said gently, wanting to offer some words of comfort as he looked at the blonde who was obviously beating herself up over what she had done 11 years ago in her state of grief, but decided against it as he failed to find the right words to say. So instead he decided to turn her attention to the pressing issue at hand and the reason why he had called her back. Let's go visit Naruto, Hiruzen said, immediately catching the way the blonde stiffened at his words and the anxious expression that replaced her regretful one. Slowly turning to her sensei, Tsunade reluctantly nodded, forcing the whirlpool of emotion and conflict she felt concerning Toka aside as she focused on healing her dying lover who needed her right now. Secret location inside of Konoha. So any idea what's wrong with him? No, Tsunade-sama, Shizune answered as she briefly glanced back at the woman who she greatly admired and had read so much about in medical scrolls. And his wounds aren't healing? Tsunade asked, glancing down at the medical file she had been handed by the young woman leading her to Naruto. Even with mystical palm technique his wounds aren't closing, which is odd considering his Uzumaki and Senju heritage. The woman said, earning a nod of agreement from Tsunade, who remembered that Naruto was a naturally fast healer like all members of the Uzumaki clan and most from the Senju clan. But his condition is stable, the woman continued. Despite the severity of some of his wounds. Shizune added, her voice low as she regretted having to tell the man's wife just how serious some of his wounds were. Thank you, Shizune-san. Tsunade said, handing back the file to the young doctor as a way to tell her she wanted to go in alone when they stopped at a door labeled in U.S. Of course, Tsunade-sama, Shizune said respectfully. If you need anything, I'll be waiting outside. Shizune added, having caught the blonde's message. Nodding appreciatively to the younger woman, Tsunade grabbed the doorknob before slowly turning it, hesitantly opening the door and walking in. Entering the medical room that had been set up for her husband. Naruto-kun, Tsunade whispered, heart aching as she stared at the broken form of her husband. The blonde, ignoring the hidden chakra signatures she felt, bolted forward, her face wet from the salty tears that began flowing freely down her cheeks. Naru-koi, Tsunade softly whispered as she gently cradled her husband's face, showering it with kisses as she affectionately stroked his cheeks, ignoring the prickling feeling she felt from the now growing beard that had decided to grace his chiseled jaw. Moving back from her husband, Tsunade smiled as she stared at the face of the man she had thought she would never see again, wondering if all this was real or a bittersweet dream she had fallen into, waiting for the moment she would wake up. He looked exactly as he had when she had last yelled his name in despair, looking over her shoulder as he charged towards Hanzo, sacrificing him so she could live. After moments of just taking in her husband's face, Tsunade composed herself, wiping her wet cheeks as she hardened her expression, forcing herself to become the legendary medical nin and not the wife of Naruto. She needed to be objective and focused if she wanted to save her husband. Backing off the bed, Tsunade counted 12 other hidden chakra signatures guarding the room, just as her sensei had said. But she ignored them, molding her own chakra and beginning her run of diagnostics. Hokage's office. So that was Tokaha, Jiraiya commented as he sat across from his sensei, looking at the door his former apprentice Minato's daughter had left from after she had demanded to see the Hokage one last time after they had finished getting ramen. Yes, she really is a handful, just like her mother Kushina-chan. Hiruzen commented, an affectionate tone in his voice. And the villagers, how have they treated her, sensei? Some have given her a hard time, Jiraiya, Hiruzen answered truthfully as he saw no reason to lie to the man across from him. Even though I have done everything in my power to ensure she is treated fairly, it would seem it wasn't enough. Hiruzen continued, sighing as he remembered how Toka and several Anbu had told him that most of the civilians and a few ninja weren't particularly fond of her. Maybe my mistake was revealing her status as a Jinchuriki and expected the villagers to see her as a hero. Hiruzen added, his tone becoming regretful as he realized he had been naive to expect Toka's sacrifice to be appreciated by all in the village, considering what had happened the night of her birth. We've all made mistakes in raising her, sensei. Jiraiya said, his voice filled with guilt as he thought of how he promised Minato and Kushina that he would take care of the young girl, but his spy network needed someone to run it, especially if it was going to stop the threats against Toka. You're right, Jiraiya-kun, but we cannot dwell on that. Instead, we should be thankful that Toka has grown up to be such a splendid person despite what she had to go through. Hi, sensei. Jiraiya agreed, nodding, knowing the old man across from him was one of the wisest people he knew. Secret location in Konoha. Shizune. The young woman heard Tsunade yell from her position outside of the medical room. Yes, Tsunade-sama, Shizune called back, bursting into the room. I have found out what's wrong with Naruto. She heard Tsunade say, her voice even. He has chakra poisoning disease. Oh. Shizune said, her face saddening as she was uncertain of what to say, knowing that the disease was very rare and little was known about it, but sadly every recorded case had resulted in the victim's death. As you know, the disease works by affecting the nature of a person's chakra in a negative manner until it becomes poisonous. Which would have explained why Naruto wasn't healing. His Uzumaki chakra would have probably lost its healing properties from the poisoning, and the mystical palm technique, as you know, is affected by the sickness. Tsunade explained, her tone neutral, causing the younger woman to worry at the older woman's lack of emotions. Tsunade-sama, Shizune said gently, slowly approaching the woman who was no doubt putting up a front. I'm sorry, no need to apologize, Shizune, or offer me your sympathies. Tsunade interrupted, holding her hand up in front of the younger medic to stop her. I developed an experimental healing technique years ago when I first stumbled upon the disease. I am sure the technique will work and cure Naruto of the chakra disease. Sure will work, Shizune repeated worriedly to herself, having heard the slight hesitance in Tsunade's voice and having never heard of a cured case before. Have you done this technique before? No, Tsunade answered, confirming Shizune's fears. There are some risks that I had not been willing to take before because the technique involves the brief linking of the patient's chakra network to another's, risking the infection and death of both the patient and the healer. Tsunade told Shizune, turning away from the young woman's shocked expression. Tsunade ignored the younger healer's protests as she began a long chain of hand signs at an incredible pace, molding her chakra as she did, taking great care to ensure she performed the technique perfectly. Forming her last hand sign, Tsunade paused as she watched her hands glow with chakra like the mystical palm technique, but instead of green glow, Tsunade saw a blue one. Reaching forward, Tsunade prayed to Kami that both she and her lover would survive as she placed her hands on the two major chakra points she had memorized from her learning days. Pushing chakra into one as she pulled from the other, Tsunade grit her teeth as linked hers and Naruto's chakra network, feeling his poisoned chakra painfully enter her own network. Purging her lover's coils of the tainted chakra, Tsunade failed to hold back an anguished scream as the process became unbearably painful. Moving as fast as she could, Tsunade forced herself to remain conscious, the pain of the purge forcing her to the edge of consciousness. Failing to hold on, Tsunade felt her eyes roll back into her skull, her vision darkening as heard the worried calls of Shizune before falling into the realm of unconsciousness. Line break. Arg, what happened? Tsunade groaned, slowly getting up as her senses gradually came back to her. Easy there, Tsunade heard an oddly familiar voice that she couldn't quite place a face to say to her. Who are you? Tsunade asked, repeatedly blinking her eyes as she tried to clear her vision and adjust to the bright light blinding her, hoping to see the person speaking to her. It's me, Susu, Tsunade heard, causing her to stiffen as she instantly recognized the affectionate nickname used only by her husband Naruto. Naru? Tsunade asked, her vision still not clear as her heart rapidly beat in anticipation at seeing the face of her husband again. Hi. Tsunade heard the blur that she could slightly make out in front of her reply as more of her vision cleared. Naruto Koi, Tsunade yelled in pure joy, blurring forward to hug the image she could barely see. Throwing her arms around him, Tsunade failed to hold back her emotions as sobbed against his chest. Releasing all the emotions she had held back throughout the years since his death. Soothed by his comforting words as he held her. It's really you? Tsunade asked moments later, stepping back as she let out the last of her tears. Wiping her eyes so she could finally see Naruto as the last of her vision cleared. It's really Tsunade screamed as she saw the Naruto in front of her. What's wrong? You're a boy, Tsunade yelled, seeing that the blur she had been clinging to moments before, thinking it was an adult Naruto, was in fact a 12-year-old version of him who looked exactly as he had when their sensei had introduced him all those years before when the two of them first met. Yeah, so, Naruto, you're a TWELV. And you're a 12-year-old girl, Susu. Naruto interrupted, gesturing at his wife's changed appearance. I am a girl, Tsunade realized, shocked, looking down at herself and seeing she was indeed a girl. What's G? Tsunade began asking, wanting to find out from Naruto what was going on, seeing as he was so calm about everything, but stopped as she turned her head to look around her, seeing nothing but white in every direction she looked. Even where she and Naruto stood seemed to be an abyss of white. I'm dreaming. Tsunade logically concluded to herself, looking at the endless white around her and the 12-year-old Naruto staring at her with a concerned expression on his face. I'm dreaming. Tsunade repeated, this time saying the words aloud. You aren't dreaming, Su. Naruto told his wife gently, placing his hands gently on both her shoulders in an effort to calm her down, seeing she was near a breakdown. I've been here for several years and I can tell you that you aren't dreaming, Harem. Naruto added, wondering how he should reveal to his wife where they were. Then where are we? Tsunade asked, knowing her husband would never lie to her. We're in Limbo, Tsunade. Secret location in Konoha. How is she? Jiraiya asked as he watched the young medic check up on his unconscious teammate, Tsunade. Physically she's fine, Shizune told Jiraiya as she ran her green glowing hands over the blonde woman whose bed had been set up next to Naruto's. But her body has fallen into a deep coma and won't wake up until she decides to. Shizune added, knowing it was the patients themselves who pulled themselves out of deep comas. In Naruto? Jiraiya asked, wondering about his other teammate whose wounds had now healed. Naruto-sama's wounds have completely healed and the chakra disease has been purged from his system. But just like Tsunade-sama, he's in a coma and won't wake up until he himself decides to. Good, a relieved Jiraiya said, his body feeling several pounds lighter as he heard the news that his teammates were going to live. Initially Jiraiya had been jealous of Naruto and disliked him. He was a prodigy, the opposite of himself, and seemed not to have to work hard to achieve anything that was ninja-related. Always possessing an unnatural ability to impress their sensei just like Orochimaru had. But that changed when Jiraiya found out from their sensei that Naruto's parents had died before he had come to Konoha, making him an orphan just like he was. From that day on, Jiraiya on his part had been kinder to Naruto and the two had grown to be good friends, with Naruto helping Jiraiya in his ninjutsu training and even learning fuinjutsu with him. When the Uzumaki Senju male told him he had a date with Tsunade, Jiraiya for the first time in ages had been jealous of Naruto. The two hadn't talked for a while and had been at odds until Jiraiya had one day seen how happy the couple had been together. Pushing aside his jealousy, Jiraiya had apologized and told Naruto he was happy that he had managed to win Tsunade's affections. After that day the two had become even closer than before, with Naruto eventually becoming akin to a brother to Jiraiya. Teaching him his personal jutsu creation, the Rasengan, which he Jiraiya had gone on to teach Minato with the permission of Kushina after the girl had failed at grasping it. When the Toad Hermit had watched his teammate sacrifice himself to Hanzo so he could live, Jiraiya had wanted to fight the salamander with him, but he had known Naruto would have never forgiven him if he had failed to ensure his pregnant wife Tsunade had escaped unharmed. So with the help of Orochimaru, Jiraiya dragged away a screaming Tsunade. His heart heavy as a part of him knew he would never see Naruto again. Feeling guilty, Jiraiya had carried the guilt of his teammate's death, never forgiving himself as he wished there was something he could have done. So Naruto could have lived and been with his family. Watching the man now, Jiraiya couldn't help but wonder what had happened to him. The man looked identical to the day he had the morning of his supposed death, which was in Jiraiya's book impossible. Even with his Uzumaki heritage, Jiraiya knew his teammate must have at least looked some years older, but the man didn't. Despite the growing beard, nothing had changed in Naruto's appearance. The man didn't even look as though a day had passed since he charged towards Hanzo. That fact had bothered both Jiraiya and his sensei. The two initially thought that the man was perhaps an imposter who imitated the appearance of his teammate Naruto. But the DNA tests and several other tests had proven that the man on the bed was without a doubt his teammate Naruto. Pushing away his thoughts, Jiraiya made his way out the room, refusing to dwell on how or why his teammate was miraculously here, but instead praying to Kami that he and Tsunade would awake soon. Limbo. Tsunade asked, not completely sure if her husband was being sincere or joking. Hi Haim. Naruto answered, gesturing for him and Tsunade to sit, knowing he had a lot to explain. But how? Tsunade asked, shocked, not sure exactly what question to ask as she sat there opposite him. When I first got here, the last thing I remember was my fight with Hanzo, and then I suddenly appeared here. Flashback. Hello. Naruto yelled as he repeatedly explored the continuous white around him, having been at it for some time now and having had no success at discovering anything besides endless white. Hello. Naruto yelled again, fearing he may go insane from the continuous white and silence around him. Hello Naruto. Naruto heard from behind him, causing him to rapidly turn around as he hoped to catch the person who was speaking to him, praying it had not been his imagination acting up or the beginnings of insanity. Kasen, Naruto said happily as he saw his mother Toka's face. No Naruto, the person he thought was his mother said. This is an appearance I have taken in hopes of making you feel more comfortable, as I rarely show my true appearance to anyone. The mysterious person told him, their voice sending cold shivers down his spine, making him realize that what the person had said was true. This truly wasn't his mother, her voice had always comforted him. Then who are you and where am I? Naruto asked. I go by many names Naruto, the figure told him. But to you I am the goddess of death, Shinigami. Shinigami-sama. Naruto stuttered, his tone nervous as he remembered all he heard about the death deity. Hi, the death goddess replied, very satisfied by the man's fearful reaction. As for where you are in limbo, the realm between life and death. Limbo? Naruto repeated, thinking over the words he had heard. Are you here to take me to my death? Naruto asked respectfully, saddened that he would never see his wife and his unborn child as he realized that he must have died in his fight against Hanzo if the goddess of death had appeared before him in the realm between life and death. That depends on you Naruto, Shinigami told him, answering his question, earning a confused look from the man. But first, how much do you love your wife and what would you endure to see her again? I love Tsunade and would do anything for her. Naruto answered earnestly without a hint of hesitance. Good, Shinigami replied, a smirk on the Shinto god's face. Flashback end. Shinigami, Tsunade thought wide-eyed as she listened to her husband's tale. Shinigami-sama told me that I would have to endure a prolonged time in limbo that could range for a year to 30 or even more, and when the day came when she felt I had endured enough, I would be sent back and given a second chance to be with you. Naruto told Tsunade, reciting the initial deal the god of death had offered on the day she had appeared before him in limbo. At first I thought it would an easy thing, Naruto continued, enduring a few days of silence and nothingness so I could be with you again. Naruto told his wife, earning a loving smile from Tsunade, who was amazed at just how far her husband would go for her. But the days became years and this place made sure I felt each them. Naruto told his wife, smiling sadly as he remembered nearly going insane, stuck here, never eating, sleeping or drinking, just nothing. Even training had been impossible as he had no chakra in this place. Seeing her husband's discomfort, Tsunade moved from her place across him and sat shoulder to shoulder with him, leaning against him as she took his hand into her own, squeezing it as a form of reassurance and comfort that she was here for him. The days grew longer as the nothingness and silence began to get to me, slowly eating at my brain as I gradually began to lose what sanity I had. Naruto continued, remembering how he nearly went mad and even began seeing hallucinations. I would have become insane, but Shinigami-sama came over one day and told me she could show me your life and everything you had been through since the day I had died in my fight against Hanzo. Naruto told Tsunade, pausing as he wondered if telling Tsunade the second part of the deal and why Shinigami had ensured Naruto remained sane now was a good idea. Deciding against it and promising to tell her later, Naruto continued with his tale, leaving out what he had promised the deity. She showed me everything from the months you spent weeping over my loss, Naruto told Tsunade, smiling sadly at her. To the birth of our baby girl Kushina-chan and her growing up. Her birthdays, her first steps, her first words, you teaching her how to be a ninja and refusing to let her be a genin unless you became her sensei. Naruto continued, pausing as he chuckled at his wife's overprotectiveness and stubbornness, remembering how she had refused to leave the Hokage's office until Hiruzen agreed to make her Kushina's sensei. Tsunade smiled sadly as she remembered the days that Naruto had been talking about. It had been Kushina who had healed her and made her loss of Naruto and Nawaki bearable. I saw everything, Susu. Naruto continued, his voice dropping low as he felt an overwhelming amount of sadness consume him at not being there for Tsunade and Kushina. I saw how it affected you when Nawaki and Kushina died. Naruto told Tsunade, wrapping his arms around her as he felt her shake against him, knowing she was crying. I was Tsunade croaked between her sobs, wanting to tell Naruto how she had felt, knowing he was the only one who could truly comfort and heal her. I know, Susu, I know, Naruto whispered soothingly, drawing Tsunade into his lap as she cried against him, wishing he hadn't died against Hanzo, knowing things would have happened differently and his wife wouldn't have had to endure all that she had had. You saw everything, Tsunade grasped moments later, pulling away from her husband as she realized Naruto must have seen her abandoning Toka. I don't hate for leaving Konoha, Susu, Naruto said, pulling his wife back to him as he read her thoughts, having seen the fear in her eyes, knowing she was afraid he would hate her for leaving Toka, but he didn't. At first I couldn't help but feel disappointed at you for leaving Toka. Naruto confessed, caressing his wife back as he felt her stiffen in his arms. You know how important family is to me, Susu, Naruto said, wanting to tell Tsunade the truth but also wanting her to understand why he had felt the way he did. Tsunade nodded, leaning into Naruto's warm as she felt a whirlpool of emotion at hearing him say he didn't hate her. She had feared it, knowing how important family was to him, fearing he would hate her and never forgive her, but hearing that he didn't, Tsunade couldn't help but feel as though a weight had been removed from her shoulders, even though she still felt ashamed for abandoning Toka, regretting it as she remembered seeing her granddaughter earlier today. But as the years went on, watching you drink and gamble, I saw how sad you were and grew to understand why you did it, why you thought leaving Toka was for the best. Naruto told Tsunade, understanding that she had been broken when she left, his wife truly believing that she didn't deserve to be loved, seeing as how everyone she had ever loved had died. It wasn't, Tsunade said, leaning away from Naruto, wanting to look her husband in the eyes and tell him that she had realized abandoning Toka was a mistake. I shouldn't have left her, Naru, I should have stayed and been there for her. Tsunade added remorsefully, admitting her mistake. The past is the past, Susu, Naruto told his wife, smiling at her, glad that she had realized leaving Toka had been wrong. Let's not talk about it, Naruto said, pulling his wife back to him as they lay back locked in each other's embrace, enjoying one another's company as they settled into a comfortable silence. So what now? Tsunade asked, looking at her husband, breaking the silence that had been between them, wondering what would be next. Now you go back if that is what you desire, a voice said from behind them, causing Naruto to slightly stiffen as he instantly recognized the death goddess's chilling tone. Shinigami-sama, Naruto said, standing up to his feet before respectfully bowing to the deity now in front of him, relieved that his wife had followed his lead as she bowed too. Naruto, Shinigami greeted back, ignoring Tsunade as she acknowledged the man she had grown to tolerate despite her hate for mortals. As I was saying, you can go back if you both desire to. Shinigami added, hating she had to repeat herself. You may, Naruto began in hopeful tone, praying to Kami he had heard Shinigami right. Yes, Naruto, your time in limbo has come to an end, and if you wish it, you and your wife can return and have a second chance at living. Shinigami impatiently explained. But first, if you decide to return Naruto, I must remind you about the other part of our bargain. The part that compelled me to ensure your sanity and the return of your wife's youth. Hi Shinigami-sama, Naruto replied, remembering what the rest of his deal was with the deity before turning to his wife, who had a look that demanded an explanation. Later, Naruto mouthed to his wife, hoping she would drop it, but alas, the fates weren't with him, and Tsunade turned to Shinigami for an explanation. What deal? Tsunade half asked, half demanded, forgetting that she was dealing with a goddess. Your husband has promised to kill 3 men and destroy a pair of eyes for me. These men and eyes can't be allowed to live and exist because they have gained or will gain power over my realm, the realm of death. But what about you? Why can't you kill these men and destroy the eyes yourself? You are the death goddess. Tsunade asked, protesting, as she didn't want to lose her husband again when they returned after she had just gained him back, guessing that these 3 men are powerful considering they have some control over the realm of death. Because even gods are bound by laws, Shinigami answered, glaring at the blonde who had dared ask her to explain her actions. Trust me, Harem, Naruto said, silencing his wife as he saw she was about to continue her protest. Naru, Tsunade began, turning to her husband to voice her concerns about the deal, wanting to ask him if there wasn't another way, but stopped as he took her hand into his own, giving it a gentle, reassuring squeeze. Trust me, Naruto repeated, gazing into his wife's brown eyes, silently pleading with her. I trust you, Tsunade whispered, her resistance breaking as she saw the silent promise in Naruto's eyes that she wouldn't lose him again. Thank you, Naruto said, smiling at his wife, wishing he could kiss and do so much more to her in that very moment, but not feeling comfortable enough about doing it to her 12-year-old form to follow through with his lustful fantasies, despite his own predicament of currently being 12 himself. I give you my word, Shinigami-sama, I will kill these 3 men and destroy the dojutsu. If you honor your end of the deal by returning my wife's body to her youth and giving me a second chance at living. Naruto promised, turning back to the goddess as he remembered the 3 men he had said he would kill. Amongst them was his former traitorous teammate and his fellow clansman. Makoto sighed as she stood conflicted at the entrance of the Inuzuka clan compound, wondering if deciding to come here had been a good or a bad idea considering the state of her relationship with her former friend, the Inuzuka clan head Tsume. Ever since the other clan heads learned the truth behind the Uchiha clan massacre, Tsume had disowned Makoto as her friend. Telling the Uchiha that the failed coup d'état she had intended to play a part in, not only went against the value of loyalty that ever Inuzuka believed in, but also nearly placed her daughter Hana and son Kiba in great danger. Thus making the Uchiha woman a person that she Tsume couldn't bear to tolerate or even consider a friend. Makoto had been hurt by the woman's words, but she knew they held truth in, so ashamed the Uchiha woman kept her distance. Making sure to avoid the feral woman, knowing that her presence only brought Tsume pain. But things had changed. Makoto missed her friend and needed someone to talk to. Her husband Fugaku had changed for the worse, becoming colder and colder since their son Itachi slaughtered the Uchiha clan, leaving only his family alive. Her son Sasuke, just like his father, had also become colder, falling under the negative influence of Fugaku and growing further apart from her as he trained with his father. Following the man she had once loved's example as he treating her, his mother, as though she wasn't part of their family. Both males only tolerating her because she held the Uchiha name. Steeling herself, Makoto moved forward into the Inuzuka compound, returning the respectful greetings she got as she anxiously made her to the house that she knew belonged to her former friend Tsume. Knocking on the door softly, Makoto braced herself as she nervously waited for the feral woman she had once considered her closest friend after Kushina died, having not spoken to the Inuzuka in the last 3 years that followed the massacre. You, Tsume greeted venomously as she opened the door to see one of the last 3, loyal, Uchiha. Tsume. What are you doing here? Tsume asked, not bothering to hide her disdain and the anger that filled her voice. I told you to never come near me again. Tsume-chan, I just want to talk, Makoto said, her heart breaking at the anger she felt rolling off the other woman. I know what I did was inexcusable and I have no right to come here like this, but I miss you, Tsume, I miss my friend. And I'm not asking you to forget what I did but to give me a chance to earn your forgiveness and regain the friendship you and me once had. Makoto pleaded, her hope rising as she saw her former friend's expression soften the tiniest bit as she contemplated the Uchiha's words. Tsume felt torn as she considered Makoto's words. On one hand, she felt bad about their broken friendship and wanted to reconcile with the Raven Head, missing her companionship. But on the other hand, she could not forget what the woman's actions 3 years ago had nearly led to and the great danger her former friend had nearly put her daughter and son in. Hardening her expression, Tsume turned back to Makoto, who watched her expectantly awaiting her decision. Don't ever come back to my clan compound again, Tsume said, coldly, breaking Makoto's heart as she slammed the door harshly in her face, leaving behind a crying woman who stared at the spot the feral woman had just been. Senju compound. Come on, Naruto Koi, come back to bed. I can't, Harem, Naruto said, ignoring his wife's whining protests as he stood up to make his way towards the shower, knowing he had to get cleaned up for the long overdue meeting they had with their sensei. I need to shower before we go meet sensei, and so do you. But I want to stay in bed, Tsunade whined, pouting cutely in an effort to get her husband back into their bed. Don't give me that look, Tsunade, Naruto said, struggling to fight the urge to comply with his wife's wishes as he stared into her pleading eyes. What look? Tsunade asked innocently as she inwardly smirked, seeing his resistance slowly breaking before giving herself a mental high five as she thought of an idea she knew would work and keep her husband in bed. I'm just saying, instead of showering you could come back to bed and do other things to me, the blonde emphasized seductively, making sure to slowly remove the silk sheet that covered her form. Naruto felt the last of his resistance break as he took in his wife's now uncovered body. Even though they hadn't left this room and had been at it like rabbits for the past week since they had woken up from their comas, he still couldn't get enough of her. She was still the goddess he had fantasized about in limbo, and she lay there bare in front of him, tempting him with that perfect body of hers. Giving into his urges, Naruto growled as he flung himself back onto the bed, forcing his lips onto hers as he kissed his wife with the unsated lust that had built up inside of him enduring his endless years spent in limbo. Ah! Tsunade moaned against her man's lips, kissing him back as she felt her nipples harden and an intense heat gather at her core. She had missed this over the years since his death, never having been with another man besides her husband. Naruto! Tsunade shrieked in surprise, breaking the kiss as she wrapped her arms and legs around the man as he suddenly lifted her off the bed, carrying her with him as he made his way across the room. We're definitely going to get that shower, Naruto told his wife. But that doesn't mean we can't do other things whilst we are in there, Naruto revealed huskily, sending a shiver down Tsunade as he drew her lips back to his own, kissing her again as his hardened member twitched against her in anticipation of all he was going to do to the goddess of a wife he had moaning against him. Konoha Market District. What's bothering you, Shizune-chan? Yugao asked her friend who sat across from her as they sat in Anko's favorite dango stand waiting for their 3 friends Hana, Kurenai and Anko to arrive. Nothing, Shizune replied a little too quickly, causing Yugao to frown and send her a disbelieving look. Fine, Shizune said, sighing in defeat, deciding to share her troubles with her friend. I've been thinking about Tsunade-sama and Naruto-sama, Shizune told her friend, whispering the last part so no one would hear since the legendary shinobi's return was still a secret, even though close to a quarter of the village already knew or suspected he had returned. Oh, was all Yugao could say, not sure where her friend was going with this. When Tsunade-sama risked her life to save Naruto-sama, I couldn't help but think that's the kind of person I wanted to learn from. A person who would actually risk their own life to save a loved one. Shizune elaborated, earning an understanding look from Yugao, who knew her friend had entered the medical field so she would have the power to save her loved ones after her Uncle Dan's death, where all she could do was hopelessly watch him die. Powerless and unable to do anything as her uncle lay dying in a pool of his own blood. So you want to get an apprenticeship under her? Yugao asked, making sure to avoid the subject of Dan, seeing no need to bring up painful memories. Yes, but I don't know how to ask Tsunade-sama. Shizune confessed, seeing as though the blonde woman had never been one to take apprentices. Even in her earlier days when she ran the village's hospital, the Senju woman didn't teach many classes, teaching never having been her thing from what Shizune had heard. Yugao didn't bother to ask if Shizune had tried talking to the Senju woman. She had been part of the Anbu guard detail assigned to watch over Naruto, and she had seen how the two lovers were when they woke up. They could barely keep their hands off of each other, and even the Hokage had given up trying to speak with them and let them swiftly leave for the Senju compound, giving them a week to reconnect, as the old man had put it. Having friends in the Anbu, Yugao heard from members of the squads watching over Naruto to ensure he wasn't a threat to the village that the couple had not left the house that they had been in, spending the past 7 days, reconnecting. How about you go see the Hokage and ask him to speak to her? Yugao suggested, knowing that the old man was easily approachable and would know how best to deal with getting her the apprenticeship she desired. I already have, Shizune told her friend, earning an expectant look from Yugao, who wanted to know what the old man said. He said he will see what he can do. Then trust him and wait for him to talk to her, Shizune. If anyone can get you the apprenticeship, it's him. Yugao said reassuringly, smiling at her friend, who returned her smile, agreeing with her that she would just have to wait for the Hokage to talk to the legendary medic. Hokage's office. So you're saying the goddess of death, Shinigami, brought you back to life after you spent several years in limbo? Hiruzen questioned, his voice laced with disbelief as he stared at the tall man before him wearing black Senju armor over a black bodysuit, his large red mane moving widely behind him as nodded his head, indicating to the Hokage that he was dead serious. Yes, Naruto answered, nodding, still not completely over his shock at how much his sensei had aged despite having seen in limbo during his viewing of his wife's life since his death. It's true, sensei. Tsunade spoke up from next to her husband, reminding herself not to tell the 2 other male occupants in the room about the second part of the deal. Having discussed that it was best to keep the information about the killing of 3 men and the destruction of the dojutsu to themselves until they both decided how best to go about it. Naruto did meet with Shinigami-sama, and so did I when I briefly entered limbo. Tsunade added, looking from her sensei to Jiraiya, the 2 men still remaining unconvinced. Fine, Tsunade said, having come up with an idea. Do you remember my genjutsu? Tsunade questioned the 2 men, earning a proud look from Naruto, who saw where his wife was going, and nod of recognition from the 2 men who remembered the genjutsu the blonde used to remain young. I'm not using it, Tsunade told the 2 men, shocking them. Shinigami-sama restored my youth and my body is back to its 20s. That's impossible, Jiraiya said in protest, finally speaking up as he had enough of his 2 teammates' impossible tales. Go on, check, Tsunade challenged, smirking a little as she saw the looks of complete shock on the 2 men's faces when they failed to sense an illusion surrounding her. My wife had her youth restored and my body was transported from over 2 decades ago into the future. What other explanation would there be for these 2 impossible things besides the work of a god, or in this case, a goddess? Naruto questioned, earning reluctant nods from the two men who in all their years had never known of any ninja or technique that was powerful enough to do the things that had happened to the couple before them. Moving on, Hiruzen said, wanting to approach the core reason of the meeting. Naruto-kun, what are your plans for the future now that you have returned? The Hokage questioned, turning all eyes to the Uzumaki Senju. I was planning on returning to active duty as a shinobi of Konoha, Hokage-sama. Naruto answered, glancing at his wife, who remained reluctant in agreeing or being happy with his decision on becoming a shinobi again, even though the two had greatly discussed it during their past week together. That's good, Hiruzen said, smiling at the man he had originally planned as his successor, wondering if he could bring his plans to fruition now that the man had returned. And Tsunade-chan, I'm assuming you will be remaining in the village but won't be returning to active duty? Hiruzen questioned, earning a nod from the blonde, who had decided to stay in the village for both her husband and granddaughter. Good. I was hoping that now that you have returned you would consider perhaps taking an apprentice. An apprentice? Tsunade repeated, mulling over the suggestion the old man had made. I would have to first look over the medical nin records and find a suitable candidate, but I think taking an apprentice sounds like a good idea, sensei. Tsunade agreed, knowing she needed something else to do when she wasn't with her family, and what better thing to do than passing on her medical knowledge that had earned her the title of legendary medic. I have someone in mind who I think will be perfect for the position. The Hokage said, thinking of the young woman he saw earlier today. Who? Shizune Kato, Hiruzen told her, smiling at the approving look that came across Tsunade's features. The one who helped me with Naruto-kun. The blonde woman clarified. Yes. I will first need to read her file and meet with her again before officially deciding to take her on or not. Tsunade told Hiruzen, not making any promises but already half sold on the idea of having the young medic as her apprentice. That's fine, the third said, knowing very well that his female student was definitely going to take on the young woman as her apprentice. Now Naruto-kun, I will have to introduce you to the council and arrange a sparring match to gauge your abilities before announcing your return publicly to the village. That's all right, Hokage-sama, Naruto agreed respectfully. But first I would like a few days for me and Tsunade-chan to get to know our granddaughter Toka. You know about Toka? Hiruzen cautiously asked, having deliberately avoided the subject, not knowing how much Naruto knew about the girl and feeling it was Tsunade's place to tell him. Yes, I know about Toka-chan and about my daughter Kushina-chan. Naruto told the Hokage, breaking the three other occupants in the room's hearts as they heard the amount of pain in the man's voice when he said the name of his daughter. And I would like to get to know Toka before the rest of village hounds me after my official return. Naruto added, earning an understanding nod for Hiruzen, who looked at his student, who had been forced to make his way to the Hokage's office under a henge to avoid the unwanted attention he would no doubt receive from the villagers once they learned of his return. Okay, I will give the two of you another week to yourselves so you can connect with and get to know Toka. Hiruzen told the couple in front of him, glancing at a guilt-stricken Tsunade who was still beating herself up over leaving the young girl behind. Thank you, sensei, Naruto said, shooting his sensei an appreciative look before taking his wife's hand into his own and squeezing it, knowing she wasn't over her guilt about leaving Toka and was probably feeling really bad right now. Yes, thank you, sensei, Tsunade said, voicing her own gratitude to the old man for being so understanding as she intertwined her finger with Naruto's, grateful for the strength and support her husband would no doubt provide as she tried to connect with the young girl she had wrongfully abandoned 11 years ago. Now that the official business is out of the way, Hiruzen said in a happy tone, standing up from his chair and making his way to Naruto. I would to officially welcome you back, Naruto, Hiruzen continued, his voice filling with emotion as he pulled his student into a fatherly hug. And tell you that I greatly missed you, Naruto, and that I'm glad you're back. Thank you. Naruto thanked earnestly, returning the man he saw as a second father's hug as he thought about how he had genuinely missed the man who had openly welcomed him here when he first moved from Uzushio. I missed you too, sensei. Naruto added, pulling back from Hiruzen before turning to his best friend. Jiraiya, Naruto called out to his best friend, taking a moment to look him over, noticing how old the man had gotten and how much he had truly changed. You've gotten old, Naruto announced, smirking, earning a punch from the white-haired man before the two gave each a one-armed brotherly hug. Naruto, Jiraiya began wanting to apologize as he pulled away ashamed from his best friend. No need to apologize, Jiraiya, Naruto swiftly interrupted, waving off his friend's apology as he saw where he was going. You made sure that my wife and child were safe that day, and that's all that matters. Naruto told Jiraiya, sending the man a grateful look to express just how appreciative he felt that he had ensured Tsunade and Kushina's safety despite how painful it must have been for him to abandon his comrade. So Jiraiya, what's this I hear from Tsunade-chan that you actually published your perverted series, Ika, and that you are in fact shockingly making money from it? Naruto asked, sending his friend a glare, causing the older man to sweat a little as he remembered Naruto's disapproval of the idea when he had initially pitched it to him. Before relaxing as he heard the Uzumaki Senju chuckling to show he was actually more amused rather than upset or angry. Well, Jiraiya began perversely, sighing in relief as he gestured for everyone to take a seat. No doubt knowing that the four of them will be here for quite a while, as three of them filled in their miraculously returned teammate on all that he had missed out on. It began outside of a private hot spring bathhouse in a small village. Jiraiya continued with a proud grin as he began to tell his best friend the tale of the conception of his first issue of his greatest masterpiece, Ika. Ignoring Tsunade's angry glares as he described the first horde of women he used as inspiration for his first book. Line break. Outside Hokage's office, Naruto sighed as he heard his wife nervously shifting again. The two of them sat waiting outside the Hokage's office as the old man explained a few things to Toka before they meet her. From what he and Tsunade had learned the previous day from their sensei, Naruto knew the old man had a lot of explaining to do and a lot of secrets to tell. Not just telling their granddaughter who he and his wife were, but also who Toka's parents were and her status as the village Jinchuriki. Naruto just hoped she took all the information Hiruzen had kept from her well and didn't hate them because so many secrets concerning her life were kept from her. Inside Hokage's office, so does the scroll become a kunai because it has one is sealed inside of it? Hiruzen questioned, having finished his demonstration about sealing a kunai into a scroll and his explanation about how the two remained separate items, hoping it would help Toka come to terms about her position of being the holder of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. No, the scroll remains a scroll, Toka answered, shaking her head as she wondered why the Hokage had pulled her out of the academy today, since he always seemed to insist on attending if she wanted to be a great ninja or have any chance at being Hokage. Good, Hiruzen said approvingly, sending the girl across from a gentle smile before sitting back as he wondered how to approach the matter at hand. Toka-chan, I need to tell you something of great importance, and it's very important that you listen carefully to what I have to say, but most importantly remember what you told me about the scroll remaining a scroll, even with the kunai sealed inside of it. Can you do that? Hiruzen asked, earning a nod of promise from Toka, who waited for the Hokage to speak, paying attention to what he had to say. Outside the Hokage office, you know you are going to wear a hole into the floor if you keep pacing like that. Naruto stated lightly, a small smirk playing on his lips as he looked at his wife, who had stood up and started pacing several moments ago. I'm sorry, Tsunade apologized, an embarrassed blush spreading across her cheeks as she moved to sit back down next to her husband. I'm just nervous and scared she might hate us, Tsunade confessed, her embarrassment fading as fear took its place. So am I, Naruto said, confessing his own similar fear as he wrapped an arm around Tsunade, drawing her in as he gave her a comforting embrace. But I'm not doing this alone and neither are you. Naruto reassured, smiling as he felt his wife relax, knowing her nerves had faded as she understood the meaning behind his word. Thank you, Tsunade whispered softly, sighing as she relaxed into Naruto's embrace, enjoying the reassurance of it as she pondered the promise of his words, knowing that no matter what happened today she would have her husband and he would have her. Inside Hokage's office, I'm the Kyuubi, Toka repeated bewildered as she tried to process what she heard from the old man sitting across from her. Toka, Hiruzen said firmly, earning the girl's attention as he looked at her worriedly, seeing her near tears. You are not the Kyuubi. Remember what you said about the scroll not becoming the kunai. Hiruzen continued, making a point to unseal the kunai from the scroll on his desk before resealing it back into the scroll. That why they hate me, isn't it, Gigi? Toka asked, her vision blurring as tears streamed down both of her cheeks. Because I hold the Kyuubi. Yes, Toka. Hiruzen admitted remorsefully as he saw just how heavy the burden was that had been placed on the little girl in front of him, though he was glad she had stopped seeing herself as the Kyuubi. They misplace their hatred because they're too stupid to see the difference between the scroll and kunai. Hiruzen muttered angrily, getting up from his chair as he moved around his desk, placing a comforting hand on the crying girl's shoulder. Is that why they left? Toka asked, looking up at the Hokage with her tear-stained face, pain flashing in her wet eyes. Who? My parents, Toka clarified, wiping her eyes with the back of her orange jacket sleeves. Because I'm AJ in True Riki. Toka added, taking great care to accurately repeat the long name the Hokage had told her about, as she remembered what one civilian man had told her about her parents leaving her when she asked if he knew where they were several years before. They didn't leave you, Toka-chan, Hiruzen said, his expression saddening as he wondered what had caused the girl to think that. Your parents loved you and wanted to be here for you. So where are they? Toka questioned, not believing the Hokage. They died, Toka-chan. The night of the Kyuubi attack, both your mother and father gave their lives protecting you in this village. Hiruzen told the girl, his tone full of sadness as he thought about how over the years he had told the young girl so many times he didn't know why the villagers treated her so differently. And the clear effect his lies had had on the emotionally broken girl in front of him, who for some sad reason believed both her parents had left and abandoned her. Your father Minato Namikaze and your mother Kushina Uzum. My father was the fourth Hokage. Toka yelled wide-eyed, wondering if she had heard right as she stared at the third in shock, having recognized the name of one of her many heroes. Yes, Hiruzen said, chuckling at the ecstatic look that flashed in the young girl's violet eyes. Your father was the fourth Hokage and both he and your mother loved you, sacrificing their lives so that the rest of the village and most importantly you could live. Toka didn't bother to wipe away the happy tears she felt forming in the corner of her eyes as she heard the old man's words that her parents loved her. She had always believed the man who had told her they abandoned her. Often thinking about them as she wondered what she had done wrong to them to cause her parents to leave her in the village where she was victim of the villagers' abuse and hatred. But now, hearing the truth from her grandfather figure, she felt a million times lighter than she ever had before. Yes, she held the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Yes, the villagers hated her because they couldn't tell the difference between a kunai and scroll. Yes, her parents were both dead, but they loved her. Her parents loved her and her father was the fourth Hokage. She couldn't wait to tell her stupid classmates and wipe those arrogant looks off their smug faces as they called her Dobi, or tomato. Toka, Hiruzen said, interrupting the girl's thoughts as he remembered the very last thing he had to tell the girl before he called in his two students waiting outside for him. They are some people I would for you to meet. People? Toka questioned, wiping her tears away on her tracksuit sleeves. Yes, Hiruzen told the girl, nodding as he paused, thinking how best to go about this before deciding to continue on his more direct approach, seeing as it had worked fairly well thus far. Your grandfather and grandmother. Grandfather and grandmother, Toka repeated in disbelief. She had never thought this day would come, first hearing about her parents loving her and now that she actually had family. Yes, they are waiting outside to meet you, and Hiruzen began wanting to tell the young girl more about his two students waiting outside and answer any question she may have before letting them in, but didn't finish as Toka bolted out of her seat, kicking open the door as she had done so many times before. Running outside, ignoring the Hokage's protests as she went to search for the two people the third had told her were family. Toka. Hiruzen yelled, chasing after the girl, but stopped as she saw the young girl run towards the only two people outside his office, embracing a startled Tsunade and a surprised Naruto who remained under his hinge as he and his wife hugged the crying girl who had both her arms wrapped her arms around the people she assumed were her grandparents. Bachan, Ojiazan. Toka croaked tearfully, clinging to the two adults the Hokage had just told her were family, knowing she would no longer be alone. Tsunade sighed contentedly as she ran a delicate finger over the faint scar across her husband's chest, bathing in the afterglow of their lovemaking as she listened to the shallow sounds of his even breathing. Ramen, Tsunade heard Naruto mutter in his sleep, causing her to quietly giggle as she wondered if it was perhaps an Uzumaki clan Kekai Genkai of some kind to have an unnatural love for the noodle dish, since every Uzumaki that had ever been in her life had an abnormal love for it. Her Bachan Mito, her husband Naruto, her daughter Kushina, and finally her granddaughter Toka. Thinking of the young girl, Tsunade couldn't help but let out a second sigh of contentment as she thought back to the past 6 days her and Naruto had shared with the amazing girl they had the privilege of calling their granddaughter. Initially, Tsunade had naturally feared what would happen when Toka eventually asked why she and Naruto had been absent for the first 11 years of her life, but the young girl hadn't asked. She had just accepted the two of them, happy she had family, and over the past 6 days the three of them had bonded. Eventually, though, Tsunade knew that the reasons behind their absences, or more importantly hers, would have to be revealed, but she and Naruto had decided it would be better to do so later rather than sooner. They knew Toka had been burdened her whole life and didn't need hearing that her grandmother abandoned her to add to her list of burdens, especially when the girl was still too young to understand Tsunade's reasons. It would only serve to do more harm than good, unnecessarily hurting Toka. So unless their granddaughter asked, the two of them had agreed they would keep the details of the past to themselves until she was mature enough to hear the reasons why. Careful to not wake Naruto, Tsunade got up and moved out of their room as quietly as she could, grabbing her silk robe as she silently made her way out. Quietly closing the door behind her, Tsunade briefly paused in the hallway to take in the calm of the night before quietly making her way towards Toka's room that lay 3 doors down on the opposite side of the silent hallway. The blonde woman had made this similar trip the past nights after Naruto fell asleep, and she had learned that Toka was a heavy sleeper. So, not bothering to be as cautious as she had been with Naruto, Tsunade opened the girl's bedroom door, making an effort to be quiet but not overly so. Hearing the even breathing emanating from the left side of the large room as she entered, Tsunade smiled as she made her way to the girl's bed, knowing she was fast asleep if her breathing was anything to go by. Stopping when a mop of red hair came into view, Tsunade giggled as she saw the comical way Toka's body had tangled its way up with her sheets, the young girl's limbs jumbled with the silk as trail of drool slowly made its way down her left whiskered cheek. "You know she gets the drooling from you," a playful voice whispered in Tsunade's ear, causing her to slightly jump in surprise before relaxing as she felt a pair of familiar strong arms wrap around her waist, instantly recognizing them as she cursed herself for not having been quiet enough when she made her silent exit of the master bedroom earlier, having obviously woken up her husband. "She does not," Tsunade denied in hushed whisper, sending the handsome man behind her a glare as she playfully slapped his wrist. Earning an amused look from Naruto, who decided to drop the issue even though he knew it was true, as he pulled her deeper into him as they stood quietly watching their granddaughter peacefully sleep. They both knew that tomorrow life for Toka would undergo a drastic change. She would no longer be the village pariah but would be the granddaughter of 4 powerful and well-known shinobi. Once Naruto's return had been announced and Toka's heritage revealed, they had tried preparing Toka for tomorrow, telling her exactly how people would react once they learned of her impressive ancestry and the best way for her to deal with them. But both Tsunade and Naruto knew the young girl would no doubt have a bit of hard time adjusting and would likely be overwhelmed by the sudden mass gain of attention. Having been accustomed to being ignored her whole life, then suddenly becoming the village princess would be a lot for the young girl to handle, and both her grandparents knew this. Which is why as they watched the young girl, both of them prayed to Kami their support and love would be enough to spare the girl from being overly overwhelmed. Sighing, Naruto gently tugged on Tsunade's waist, signaling to her that it was getting late and both he and his wife needed their rest if they were going to face tomorrow and protect the young girl peacefully sleeping on the messy bed before them. Nodding, Tsunade moved out of her husband's embrace, making her way forward as she gently kissed Toka's forehead before following Naruto out the room. Both of them sharing a look as they silently vowed to one another to forever protect and love the young girl they left sleeping in the room behind them. Line break. Next day, Uchiha compound. Morning, Sasuke-chan. Morning, Fugaku. Makoto half-heartedly greeted as she lay the breakfast plates before her waiting son and husband. Sasuke, Fugaku said, completely ignoring his wife as he called for his son's attention. There is a girl called Toka Uzumaki in your class, one need you to befriend her. The Uchiha man ordered, knowing fully well who the girl was, what she held and how she would perfectly fit into his plans, seeing as how her position in the village would surely change with the supposed return of her grandparents that he had heard stories and rumors about, but first his son needed to gain her trust. Hi Tusama. Sasuke begrudgingly complied, nodding, ignoring his mother's greeting as he silently sat eating. Hating that his father wanted him to befriend the loud-mouthed dead last but not daring to question him as he knew better than to argue with his father's wishes. Makoto, Fugaku called out, gaining the attention of woman who he also had future plans for. I need you to attend a council meeting on our clan's behalf today. Fugaku ordered in a tone that left no room for defiance, just as he had with Sasuke. As he saw no reason to personally attend a meeting where he just served as a seat warmer, having no official power. Ever since the Uchiha clan's massacre, the Hokage had secretly removed the clan privileges, rights of the Uchiha, emptying the clan's treasury as he repossessed the Uchiha's wealth, reclaiming all of their assets and properties, even going as far as removing their power to vote on the council. The only reason the Uchiha clanhead's presence had still been required at council meetings was to maintain a facade and avoid the civilian council's suspicions, who still, like everyone else besides the shinobi clanheads, believed that the Uchiha were still a clan even though their wealth and privileges had been reduced to that of a common civilian family. What time is it? Makoto asked, wanting to know what time she had to leave for this meeting before frowning as she watched Fugaku continue to eat his breakfast as though she hadn't spoken. Fugaku, what time is it? Makoto questioned again more forcefully, earning her a chilling glare from the man who sent her a warning look that told her he didn't like the tone in her voice before he stood up, walking out the room as he left behind his half-eaten breakfast, not bothering to answer the woman he had married's question. Makoto gritted her teeth as she forcefully pushed down her anger, nearly breaking her chopsticks as she watched the retreating form of her husband. She had had enough, having grown tired of the way her family acted and treated her like she was beneath them. She was done taking it. She had really tried for Sasuke's sake, to try and bring back their family together, but enough was enough. Leaving behind Fugaku's plate, Makoto got up and made her way to the kitchen, cleaning her own dishes as she told herself she was done playing housewife and acting like everything was fine. She would no longer cook for them, clean for them, or do anything for them until the two males decided to change their attitudes towards her. Placing her last dish on the rack, Makoto smiled, thinking of exactly what she was going to do now that she was done playing the victim, but first she needed to speak to the third Hokage. Senju compound. Toko was nervous as she looked herself up and down, taking in her new outfit as she thought of everything that was going to happen today. She knew she would receive the mass attention of the village, which was something she always thought she had wanted, hence the attention-grabbing bright orange tracksuit and the attention-seeking pranks. But standing there alone in her new room, Toka couldn't help but feel conflicted about getting the thing she had always thought she wanted. On one hand, she was ecstatic she was the member of not one but two badass clans and would get the acknowledgement she craved her whole life from the village, no longer being ignored as she had. But on the other, Toka knew deep down she no longer truly desired the villagers' attention as much as she previously had, since she learned her parents loved her and since she gained two grandparents that not only took care of her but also loved her. Toka also knew that with the acknowledgement and attention came the pressure of expectation. Though her grandparents hadn't warned her about that, Toka knew everyone would expect great things of her once they learned of her heritage. She may be the dead last, but Toka was not stupid. She knew with parents and grandparents like hers, everyone would expect great things from her, and a part of her couldn't help but fear she would be a disappointment. Not only to the villagers but also to her grandparents. She feared she would disappoint them and possibly lose them, returning back to a life of being alone, which she really did not want. Grinning, Toka pushed away her negative thoughts. She had never been one to be a downer, and with Tsunade Bachan and Naruto Ojiazin's training as the two of them had offered, Toka knew she would be a badass, that she would not fail her family name and would make both her grandparents and parents proud. Toka-chan, hurry up or else you going to be late for the academy. Toka heard her grandmother yell from outside of her door. I'm coming, Bachan. Toka yelled back, giggling as she imagined the angry tick mark her grandmother always gained when she called her Bachan. Line break. Council meeting chamber. Hiruzen sighed as he sat watching the several men and women that made both sides of the council. The shinobi side, except for the Nara head Shikaku, looked angry, some of them downright near murderous, as they waited for the missing Uchiha member who was delaying the start of their meeting. The civilian side, however, looked surprisingly calm compared to the shinobi side, no doubt more receptive of waiting for one of the last, loyal, Uchiha. Hokage-sama, Hiyashi spoke up respectfully, breaking the silence. Perhaps we should start the meeting without Fugaku-san. The Hyuga head suggested, having had enough of waiting for a man who was not only a non-clan head but worst of all a traitor. We can't do that, Genko, a rich civilian merchant, protested. Uchiha-sama holds a seat on this council and therefore a meeting cannot start without him. He's right, Shikaku lazily agreed, ignoring the glares his fellow clan heads shot him. A meeting cannot be held without the Hokage and all of the members of both sides present. The Nara continued, reciting one of the many conditions that had to be met for a council meeting to be official and for any decision made to be valid. Hiruzen nodded, agreeing with the Nara head, whom he knew disapproved of his decision to secretly strip the Uchiha clan of its rights. Arguing that it was the clan's initial isolation and lack of recognition that played a part in leading the clan to an attempted rebellion, and it would be the continued isolation and lack of recognition that would play a part in the risk of a future attempt at another coup d'état. The third knew the Nara was right, as he usually was, but he also knew giving the surviving members a free pass, especially Fugaku, would be the wrong thing to do. Had it just been Sasuke that was spared, as Itachi had said he would, then yes, the boy would have a free pass and the Uchiha would retain every privilege that a shinobi clan held. But this was Fugaku, the spear tip of the coup, and Hiruzen couldn't let him get a free pass for all his crimes. So for now the revoked rights would have to be enough until the third came up with a better way to deal with the former clan and its future. Hawk, Inoichi the Yamanaka head began, wanting to suggest the meeting be rescheduled, seeing as though Fugaku wasn't coming and he along with everyone else surely had more important things to do than wait for the traitorous man, but stopped as the door to the meeting room opened to reveal the man's wife Makoto. Sorry I'm late, Hokage-sama. Makoto apologized in a repentful tone. My husband Fugaku forgot to tell me what time the meeting was. The Uchiha woman added, lying. Earning an understanding nod from Hiruzen before the old man gestured for her to take her seat, not bothering to look into the matter even though he knew she was lying. Having used the observation skills he had gained over his years as Hokage and of dealing with people to catch on to the fact that Makoto had not been completely honest, though choosing to shrug it off for now as he deemed it unimportant for the time being. Sending an apologetic look to all the eyes that were watching her, Makoto made her way to the empty seat between Hiashi and Shibi, cursing Fugaku for not telling her what time the meeting was. Having learned that it had already started from the Hokage's secretary when she had gone to his office to see him, only to find out that he was currently unavailable as he was attending a council meeting. Now that we are all here, Sume heard the Hokage begin, starting the meeting. But she did not bother to listen as her worried eyes watched the raven-haired woman seated several chairs to the left of her. She could see the bags under her eyes and the tired look on her face telling her that something serious was bothering the Uchiha. She knew it had to do with Fugaku, having seen the pain that flashed in the woman's onyx eyes when she mentioned the traitor's name. Looking at the woman she had once called her sister, Sume couldn't help but feel a wave of guilt for the way she slammed the door in Makoto's face. She could see that the woman needed someone to lean on, someone to help her deal with whatever was troubling her, and that person to Makoto had been her, and she just turned her away without giving it a second thought. Sighing, Sume decided for now she would listen to the Hokage and think about her broken friendship some other time when there weren't important matters to discuss. Hearing the collective grasp of most of the people around her, Sume turned her eyes from Makoto, turning in the direction she had noticed everyone staring before. A shocked grasp of her own joined the rest she had heard. A faint heat spreading across her cheeks as she blushed at the very handsome man that stood proud before her, instantly recognizing him as Naruto Uzumaki Senju. Makoto on her part tried with fail to not blush as she stared at the intensely handsome man before her. The man was tall, red-haired and had an athletic figure like most shinobi. He wore a set of complete black Senju armor over a bodysuit and had a waist-length wild mane that gave his incredibly handsome features and chiseled face a slightly feral look. Hokage-sama, the man greeted respectfully, turning to Hiruzen as his gaze briefly fell onto Makoto, causing her heart to quicken as her onyx eyes briefly locked with violet ones that seemingly glowed with an unquestionable authority and undeniable power that demanded her respect as they gazed upon her. Naruto-kun, the Hokage greeted warmly, breaking Makoto from her flustered state as the swift realization hit her that the man she had been checking out was in fact Kushina's dead father. Line break. Senju compound. Tsunade couldn't help but smile as she stood waiting for her granddaughter by the Senju compound gates. Today would be her first time spending time with Toka in public as she walked the young girl to the academy. Though the blonde woman and Naruto had wanted to do many things with the young girl around the village, like get ramen from Ichiraku's, the Hokage had warned against it before they meet Toka, saying that the young girl being in the presence of one of the Yanin, since Naruto would be under a henge, would only draw attention to them, since Tsunade had only just returned back to the village after years of missing, and even if the blonde also used a henge, the young girl calling someone her grandmother or grandfather would also draw a lot of attention to them, since the young girl was widely known to be an orphan with no family. So reluctantly Tsunade and Naruto had agreed that after they meet Toka they would only spend time with her in the confines of the Senju compound after telling the Hokage that they planned to offer their granddaughter the option of living with them. Hiruzen had smiled at that, telling them it was for the best since Naruto wouldn't have to use a henge, Toka would have a new home and the villagers wouldn't bother them as they tried bonding with the young girl. Toka at first had not understood why she had to keep who parents and grandparents were a secret when they told her she had to and why she could only spend time with them inside the Senju compound. But after the Hokage had explained why for the third time the young girl had understood and had done a very opportunist-like thing. Flashback. What? Tsunade yelled as both Naruto and Hiruzen chuckled in amusement. If you want me to keep quiet and do what you said, I want a week away from the academy and a week's supply of ramen made by you Bachin. Toka repeated with a fox-like grin, staring at her grandmother as she thought of how she wasn't going to miss out on a week away from Iruka's boring lectures and possibly the best ramen she would ever taste. Remembering in that very moment what her friend Choji had said about how food made by his mother was the best he had ever tasted. And since she didn't have a mother, she would settle for trying her grandmother's to test her chubby friend's theory, and even if Choji was wrong, who was she to pass up on the chance at a week's worth of ramen? I think it's reasonable, Naruto stated, trying to sound as though he was reluctant, his eyes however betraying him as they shone with pride. Yes Toka-chan, you have a deal, Tsunade also agreed moments later, inwardly smirking at her husband, who she knew had been particularly quick to agree because he heard the part about the week's worth of ramen she had to cook. Oh, how she was going to enjoy the look of disappointment that crossed his face. You don't have to go to the academy for the next week, Tsunade agreed, smiling at Toka, since that condition would let both her and Naruto spend more time with the young girl. And I will cook you ramen this whole week. Tsunade continued, emphasizing the you part as she smirked, seeing Naruto's face fall when he realized his wife wouldn't include him on the week's worth of ramen boat. Yada! Toka yelled, jumping up in triumph. She had just learned her parents loved her. Meet her grandparents a couple of hours ago, and now she was moving in with her grandparents, had a week away from the academy and a week's worth of homemade ramen. This day truly couldn't get any better, Dadbao. Toka stated, her mouth drooling as she thought of the week of ramen ahead, earning her laughs from the three adults who were watching her. Flashback end. Tsunade smiled at the fond memory. The girl's actions reminded her of what she had done when she was a young girl. Taking advantage of the fact that she had her grandfather Hashirama wrapped around her little finger just like Toka had Naruto wrapped around hers. Shaking her head, Tsunade pushed away the memory. Yes, that night she had cooked ramen for Toka and Naruto. After the third helped Toka move her important stuff from her apartment into the compound, and yes, she had cooked ramen for her only the following 6 days. But Tsunade knew it needed to stop. The girl's body was still developing and she needed to be on a healthy diet. So just as the blonde had done with Naruto when they started dating despite his protests, Tsunade told herself she was going to limit the girl's ramen to only 3 meals a week. Toka might be angry at her for it, but she needed to be the girl's mother. She owed it to not only Kushina but to Toka herself to make sure the young girl grew up to be the best person she could be. Bachin! Toka yelled excitedly, running towards her waiting grandmother. You're late, Tsunade commented simply, trying to sound disapproving but failing immensely as she looked at her bubbly granddaughter, who looked beautiful in the new outfit the young girl had chosen to replace her bright orange one. Bachin, what's wrong? Toka asked, fidgeting nervously as she saw the weird look her grandmother was giving her, wondering if she was going to get into trouble for being late. Nothing, Tsunade said, shaking her head as she realized she must have been staring. You just look beautiful, Toka-chan. Tsunade told her, smiling, thinking of how the girl truly did and how much she reminded her of Kushina. Hence why she had spaced out as her mind wandered to memories of her daughter. Thank you, Bachin, Toka replied, slightly embarrassed, as she still didn't feel completely comfortable with what she wore, though she admittedly liked the new outfit more than her old tracksuit one. Well, let's go, Tsunade said, sticking out hand for Toka to take, causing the girl to suddenly freeze as she stared at it. What's wrong? Tsunade asked worriedly, swiftly withdrawing her hand as she noticed the girl's change in expression. It's just. Toka began, her eyes watering as she paused, fearing her grandmother would think she was silly if she admitted the truth before continuing, as Tsunade sent her an encouraging nod. I've always wanted someone to take me to the academy, Toka admitted, thinking of how enviously she was of all the other kids she had seen walking to the academy with their parents or someone close to them, whilst she had no one. Shikamaru, Choji, Kiba, Shino, everyone, one even Sasuke Tem, they all had someone. Toka explained, wanting her Bachan to understand. But I didn't. Oh Toka, what I have done to you, Tsunade thought sadly, hating herself as she felt an explosion of guilt grip her being. She had done this, she had left this girl, she had forced her to walk to the academy alone, she had left her to the villagers' treatment, and worst of all, Toka hadn't blamed her, hadn't been angry at her like she deserved to be. She had just accepted her, opening up to her without even asking where she had been, and that made Tsunade hate herself more. You have me and your Ojiazan now, Toka-chan. The two of us will always be here for you, Tsunade earnestly promised, smiling warmly as she offered her hand again. Toka tearfully returned Tsunade's smile as she hesitantly grabbed the offered hand. Yes, the Hokage had taken her to the academy a total of 4 times in the past 3 years since Toka started, she had counted, but she never felt anything like the feeling she was feeling now. Yes, the old man had made feel safe, but he had never made her feel cared for, loved like her Bachan did, and that made the young girl truly smile as she walked next to her grandmother, making the trip to the academy for the first time without feeling alone and unloved. Line break. Council chambers. Hiruzen smiled approvingly as he gazed upon his student. He truly looked near invincible as he stood proudly before the council in his Senju armor. The Uzumaki Senju man had a look about him that meant business. It wasn't the usual look he had on when he was before his family and friends. No, it was a look he wore when he needed to look intimidating or authoritative, and that he did, fitting perfectly into any of the two roles. Glancing at the man, Hiruzen in that moment could see more of the Yonin's mother than he could his father. Yes, Naruto was the spitting image of his father Kenshin, but his attitude and the authoritative air currently around him was a trait he had definitely inherited from his mother Toka. Having met both his parents before Hiruzen knew Kenshin had been a hopeless flirt that no person could ever take seriously despite his strength and skill as a shinobi. Toka, however, had a demeanor that contradicted Kenshin's, serious, respectable with an authoritative air that matched the likes of Hashirama or Tobirama. The only time Hiruzen had seen Toka without her usual composure was in Kenshin's presence, where she would blush and say things like, "Databane," much to the shock and amusement of those around her. Looking at Naruto now, Hiruzen knew that both his parents were undoubtedly proud of him wherever they were in the afterlife. Their son had grown up into a fine man who made an exceptional shinobi both in character and in strength, with abilities only seen once in every generation in the likes of legends like Madara Uchiha or Hashirama Senju. No doubt Naruto was on his way to match and maybe even surpass both in the years to come. Truly, the man before him would be the perfect successor. He even had the ability to shut up the civili. Naruto-sama, Yonin-sama, Uzumaki Senju-sama, Raiyan no Konoha. Hiruzen heard the civilian council start to shout out randomly, breaking the silence with their shouts as the third cursed himself for having clearly spoken too soon about Naruto's ability to silence the annoyingly loud civilian council. Silence. Hiruzen roared, flaring his killing intent as an impressed Naruto made his way to his sensei's side. The Uzumaki Senju turning to face the council as he inwardly approved of the Hokage's method of dealing with the shrieking. Making a point to stand at his sensei's right, Naruto shifted his violet gaze around the room, glancing at each member of the council individual. Noticing how most of the males in the room looked respectful and awed by his presence whilst the females all looked flustered, spotting an obvious blush besides the Inuzuka who shot him a flirtatious wink and the raven head whose gaze he had briefly met earlier who now averted her eyes looking anywhere but him. So the rumors are true, Hiyashi stated respectfully, addressing the man who was of greater legend than his former classmate Minato Namikaze. You have indeed returned, Naruto-sama. Yes, I have. Naruto replied evenly, slightly nodding at the man he instantly recognized as a Hyuga, wondering if he was as uptight as he remembered the clan to be. But how? Shibi asked, adjusting his glasses as he gazed at the man everyone knew died. You died in the Second Shinobi War fighting against Hanzo. Shibi bluntly stated, thinking of the story everyone knew of Team Hiruzen. The 4 shinobi that fought against Hanzo the Salamander and his army. Where the strongest of them, Naruto, fell as he solely fought Hanzo so his team could escape after the 4 of them had defeated hundreds of shinobi, earning them the title of Yanin throughout the elemental nations despite Naruto's death. Naruto wanted to chuckle as he looked at the Aburame, who was as blunt and stoic as he remembered members of his clan to be. It was nice seeing some things hadn't changed. I didn't. Naruto lied, remembering the story him, Tsunade and his sensei had agreed upon. One moment Hanzo was about to land a killing blow on me and the next I woke up 30 years in the future lying in a hospital bed. Naruto explained, slightly grimacing as he remembered a wounded Hanzo towering over him. The salamander's eyes glinting in victory as he told Naruto that he had fought well, but it was not enough before his body screamed in pain as Hanzo's blade pierced him. The how of Naruto's being here remains unclear. Hiruzen lied, quickly butting in, knowing he had to shift these people away from the topic of the mechanics behind Naruto's return and get them on another topic before the likes of Shikaku started questioning the flaws of his tale or the likes of Danzo started questioning his loyalty. All we know is he survived his fight against Hanzo and his appearance in Konoha had something to do with the chakra surge we felt several weeks ago. Hiruzen added vaguely, relieved to see that the bulk of the council nodded, believing that some things couldn't be explained, especially in the shinobi world, as they decided to drop it. Now Naruto has already decided to return to active duty and has taken up residence in his former home in the Senju compound with his wife Tsunade Senju Uzumaki and his granddaughter. Hiruzen announced, earning puzzled looks from the civilians who thought the man had no grandchildren and knowing looks from the shinobi side who knew the man in fact did. Granddaughter? A civilian man asked, confused, having never heard of the Yanin having grandchildren. Yes. Who? The civilian asked, his eyes and everyone else's on the Hokage and Yanin. Toka Uzumaki Senju. Naruto butted in, answering before the Hokage could. Naruto-sama, that demo. A civilian woman began wanting to protest as she wondered if the Kyuubi had somehow influenced the respectable man into believing they were somehow related, but stopped as a killing intent that surpassed the thirds earlier one flooded the entire room. That girl is my granddaughter, Naruto stated, his voice dangerous low, glaring at the woman as he further raised his killing intent to a point where the civilians couldn't breathe. Holding it there as he hardened his eyes, enjoying the sight of watching her and her fellow civilians squirm. Toka Uzumaki Senju is the daughter of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki Senju. She is also my granddaughter and the granddaughter of my wife Tsunade Senju Uzumaki. And you have no right to call her demon. Naruto spat out in disgust, anger filling his voice as he raised his killing intent further, remembering the stories he heard from his sensei about what the villagers, a majority of them being civilians, did to Toka. Thankfully none of them had been stupid enough to do anything physical, or else this meeting would have ended differently. That's enough, Naruto. Hiruzen ordered firmly, knowing that any further exposure to his student's killing intent may kill one of the elder civilians, which he couldn't have, despite how much he enjoyed seeing them sweat a little. Hi Hokage-sama. Naruto complied respectfully, lowering his killing intent, gradually causing the civilians to breath out in relief as they realized how bad they had messed up with their resentment towards the little girl and how they had to change whether they wanted to or not if they desired to live. Nodding to himself satisfied as he saw the looks on the civilian faces, Naruto knew that his point concerning any negative treatment towards Toka had been made crystal clear. Hiruzen, Danzo spoke up for the first time in the meeting, breaking the silence that had filled the room after Naruto's threatening display. You said Naruto was planning to return to the shinobi ranks. Danzo questioned, ignoring the part of the Jinchuriki's heritage, having already known about it but choosing not to do anything in the past since his old teammate had protected her, and knowing that doing something now would only lead to his death if what the Yanin had done several minutes ago was anything to go by concerning the man's position on any offensive act made against the Kyuubi holder. Yes, Hiruzen said, nodding at Danzo as he grew suspicious of the man. Naruto plans to return to active duty. Hiruzen repeated, closely watching the old war hawk. How about a spar? Danzo suggested, needing to know the abilities of the man who had suspiciously returned to the village after all these years of his supposed death. A spar to gauge Naruto's ability before the council to see if his abilities still matched to that of his title Yanin. Danzo elaborated, openly challenging the red-haired man to prove himself, knowing he couldn't refuse, at least not in front of so many important figures that held positions of power in the village. I have already arranged for a spar to take place after the announcement of his return, Danzo. Hiruzen told his teammate, knowing exactly what he was doing. What if we combined the two? A civilian man fearfully suggested, glancing at the rest of his fellow civilians who were still in shock over Toka's heritage and the feeling of near death they had experienced moments before. We could have a public spar in the Chunin exam stadium, where Hokage-sama can announce your return, Naruto-sama. The man continued, hoping to get on the Yanin's good side with the clever idea, knowing him and the rest of his fellow civilians weren't in the best of books with the dangerous man right now. That sound like a good idea. Hiashi agreed. He could see the merit behind Naruto showing his strength in front of the bulk of the village. Naruto. Hiruzen questioned, wanting to know if his student was okay with that. It's fine, Hokage-sama. Okay, then after the closing of this meeting a spar will be held in the Chunin exam stadium where I will announce Naruto's return. Hiruzen announced, earning approving nods all round. Who else will be taking part in this spar, Hokage-sama? Tsume asked, knowing she would be lying if she said she hadn't been overly enjoying the meeting with this fine specimen of a man before her, wondering who she would get to see him in action with. Kakashi Hatake, Maeda Guy, Anko Mitarashi and Kurenai Yuhi. Hiruzen announced, earning disappointed looks from Tsume and the shinobi side. Hokage-sama, don't you think Naruto-sama fighting each of these individuals in their respective field of expertise is a little too mild a test for a man of his capabilities? Tsume questioned, her eyes never leaving the Yanin as she summed up the clan head's thoughts, who, like the Inuzuka woman, believed a man of his reputation should at least fight the likes of Jiraiya or even the Hokage himself. He wouldn't be fighting them one against one, Tsume-chan. Hiruzen stated, agreeing with the Inuzuka that none of the four would be enough for individual matches against Naruto. Having originally wished to pit Jiraiya against him, who was strong enough for a one-on-one match, but the Toad Hermit had already returned to his spy network a few days before. He will be fighting all four of them at once. Hiruzen clarified, stating his solution to Naruto fighting a worthy opponent as he earned approving looks from some of the clan heads who knew how well the mentioned shinobi worked together and how as a team they should be a good match for the Yanin. That should be interesting, Tsume thought to herself, not bothering to reply the Hokage as she bit the corner of her bottom lip. Thinking of Naruto fighting in that form-fitting Senju armor of his as he dominated the match, wishing he would dominate something else entirely as she subconscious rubbed her thighs together. Makoto shifted in her seat as she glanced at the Hokage, torn as she thought of the opportune moment that had just presented itself, a public spar. She knew that if she wanted to approach the Hokage with her request, she needed him to know she was still strong and that years of motherhood and being a housewife hadn't corroded her abilities. I would like to volunteer for the spar, Hokage-sama, Makoto spoke up, turning everyone's attention towards her, including Naruto's. Excuse me? Hiruzen asked, his shocked tone summarizing everyone else's thoughts in the room as they too were caught off guard by the request. I would like to volunteer for the spar to test Naruto-sama's abilities. Makoto repeated confidently, ignoring the stares she got. Why? Hiruzen asked, his shock turning to suspicion as he locked his gaze on Makoto, watching her closely. Though she may not have been Fugaku, this woman was still his wife and she had played a part in the planning of the failed coup, which made the Hokage uneasy as he wondered what the Uchiha's ulterior motive was and if had anything to do with harming Naruto, seeing as how the Uchiha and Senju clans had never seen eye to eye. I have my reasons, Hokage-sama, Makoto replied. Reasons I would prefer to tell you privately later on. Makoto elaborated, not really comfortable with explaining her reasons behind the request for joining the spar in a room full others, hoping the Hokage wouldn't force her to. Fine, you can be Naruto's fifth opponent, Hiruzen concurred, knowing his student could full well handle 5 opponents, but I would like to hear your reasons before the spar begins. Hiruzen added, making a mental note to carefully grill her and pull her out the spar if he wasn't satisfied. Hi Hokage-sama, the Uchiha replied, smiling gratefully at the third, before for the first time since the man's entrance Makoto returned her gaze to the man she volunteered to fight, Naruto. Glancing at him, Makoto felt her heart fluttered again as she took in his impressive looks, wondering if she was perhaps in over her head as her eyes roamed appreciatively over his powerful stature. Blushing as she realized what she was doing before forcing her eyes to turn away as she cursed herself for checking out her friend's father again and looking at a man the way she had Naruto, considering she was still married to Fugaku no matter how strained their relationship had been. Line break. Shinobi Academy. Hinata nervously fidgeted in her seat as she wondered if her crush would make an appearance in class today, considering how it had been a week since the Hyuga girl had last seen Toka, and she couldn't help but worry. She had asked the redhead's friends Choji, Shikamaru and Shino, hoping to gain answers, but none of them knew. She knew she should have also asked Kiba just in case, but the Inuzuka had an interest in both her and her crush, and that made Hinata feel a bit uneasy with asking him. She had briefly considered asking her father since he seemed to know a whole lot of things concerning the village, but Hinata could not risk it. She couldn't risk her father learning of her interest in Toka no matter how worried she was. She knew he wouldn't approve and would only be further disappointed by her if he learned of it. Hinata wasn't stupid. She knew that as heiress she was expected to marry and have children that would one day lead the clan when she passed. And she knew with her interest in Toka the latter would not occur, further disappointing not only her clan but her father because of the resulting failure to do her duty if she gave into what she felt for Toka. She had tried resisting and changing her feelings, but she couldn't help how she felt for the outspoken redhead. She just wished she had someone to talk to, someone to tell her what to do and guide her, and that person would have been her mother, but she had died when her sister Hanabi was born. Sighing, Hinata turned her attention back to Iruka, pushing away her thoughts concerning her missing crush as she listened to the lecture on the Hatake clan. Tsukumo Hatake the Shiroi Kib, Iruka continued but stopped as he heard the door open, turning everyone's attention towards the room entrance including Hinata's. Toka, Hinata thought happily, her mood instantly picking up as she saw the girl entering before blushing ferociously as she saw what her crush was wearing. The usual bright orange oversized tracksuit the redhead was well known to wear had been replaced by a short black skirt over a pair of knee-length black tights. On her upper body the girl wore a black top under a form-fitting green jacket that showed off her developing figure, replacing her bulky orange one. Locking her gazing with Toka's, Hinata reminded herself to breath as the two of them stared at one another for what felt like forever to her before the Hyuga girl averted her lavender eyes as she felt the nearness of unconsciousness rapidly approaching. Tomato-chan, what happened to your clothes and why are you wearing the Senju clan symbol? Hinata heard a random girl jealously ask, turning her attention back to her crush as she let her eyes roam over the outfit before quietly grasping as she saw the symbol on the girl's sleeve. Senju, Hinata thought in shock as she stared at the Senju clan symbol printed on Toka's sleeve, realizing she had been right all along. Several months ago, whilst she read a book on the Four Yonin, Hinata had seen a picture of Team Tsunade. In the picture was a blonde woman, Tsunade Senju Uzumaki, and her apprentice daughter who had immediately caught the Hyuga girl's attention, Kushina. She literally looked like a clone of Toka except in different clothes and without the whisker markers, and Hinata had immediately put two and two together, concluding the two must have somehow been related, meaning Toka had Senju blood. Wanting to approach Toka, Hinata had tried to speak to her the next week to tell her about it, but her nerves and fear of perhaps being wrong kept her from it. But looking at the symbol now, Hinata knew she was right and cursed herself for not earlier telling Toka, wishing she had. Sorry I'm late, Uruka-sensei. Toka apologized, ignoring the question that may lead her to prematurely exposing her heritage as her grandparents had told her to. It's fine, Toka, please take a seat, Uruka said, surprising everyone including Toka herself, who was used to her sensei being on her case whenever she was late. Uruka ignored the looks he got as he stared at the second clan symbol on the girl's other sleeve, making him inwardly curse as he wondered why he hadn't noticed before now who this girl really was. Having chased after Toka the night she had stolen the forbidden scroll, Uruka had been close to the forest when the massive chakra spike had occurred and had swiftly made his way towards it the instant he felt it. When he arrived at the scene, Uruka had been one of the first to discover the returned body of the Yonin everyone believed had died. He had immediately noticed the man's red hair and the two small clan symbols he wore on the collar of his damaged armor. The very same symbols that Toka did now, and the very same hair color only Toka had. The same hair the man's dead daughter Kushina also had. Looking at the young girl making her way to her seat, Uruka realized who the girl he had once wrongfully blamed for the loss of his parents 11 years ago was. The daughter of Kushina Uzumaki Senju and the granddaughter of the Raion no Konoha Naruto Uzumaki Senju, one of the greatest shinobi Konoha had ever seen, and he had neglected her. Looking at her back, Uruka promised to stop hindering her and to better teach her so she could become a shinobi that matched her grandfather. Toka ignored the stares she felt on her as she made her way towards her four friends in their familiar corner, wanting to sit with them but stopping as she noticed the only free seat was next to Kiba, who was giving her a look that she didn't like and made her feel greatly uncomfortable. Looking around, Toka saw a free seat next to Hinata and decided to make her way towards it, though she had never really spoken to the girl much except for a few times here and there. Looking at the brunette, Toka felt the familiar weird feeling she got in her chest whenever she thought of or looked at Hinata. Initially she had dismissed the feeling, saying that it came from the girl not being like the other people in her class who picked on her or call her names like Tomato, but that didn't explain why she never felt the same thing when she looked at her four friends, the Hokage, her grandparents, or anyone else who had been kind to her. Shrugging it off, Toka told herself she would ask her Bachan later, stopping by Hinata, who couldn't look at her crush as she kept her gaze down, staring at her hands. Hinata, do you mind if I sit here? Toka asked politely, not realizing the effect her presence had on the Hyuga as she remembered the manners her Bachan had taught her the past week, wanting for some reason to impress Hinata. Not trusting her voice, Hinata shook her head, blushing as she turned to face Toka before meekly gesturing for her to sit. Thank you. Toka thanked Hinata gratefully, wondering worriedly if the girl was sick or something as she noticed her red face, sitting down as she ignored all the eyes that still felt on her as she turned to face Iruka. Iruka-sensei, why is Tomato Baka wearing the Senju clan symbol? Sakura angrily shrieked, wondering why the redhead had not been called out for firstly being late and secondly wearing a clan symbol of a clan she wasn't even a part of. Yes, sensei, why is she wearing a clan symbol, when it's against the village rules to wear a clan symbol if you aren't part of a clan? Ino angrily added, not liking the attention Toka was getting from all the boys as she recited what her father had taught her about clan symbols. Iruka sighed. He didn't know what was more exhausting, the fact that the students he personally taught didn't recognize the Uzumaki clan symbol that Toka was also wearing, one of them being his top student Sakura, or the fact that they wanted answers about something he had been instructed to keep quiet about. Knowing the explanation would involve the returned Yanin, Naruto. Iruka began wanting to tell the two girls and everyone that they had a lesson to finish instead of asking questions about Toka, but stopped as an Anbu agent appeared in the class via a Shunshin no Jutsu. Iruka-san, Shami-san, the Anbu agent spoke from behind his mask to the teachers. The Hokage has requested that you move all the members of your class to the Chunin exam stadium immediately. Chunin exam stadium, Shami repeated, shocked by the odd request. Did he say why? No, he just requested you do so immediately, the Anbu replied, leaving via the same way he came in, not bothering to wait for a reply as he already knew the two Chunin would follow the Hokage's instruction. Well, Uhea, Shami began wanting to give the order for the students to follow him before stopping as he shook his head, watching the bulk of them noisily bolting out the class, not even knowing where they were going. I'll follow them, the lanky man told Iruka before chasing after the students that had left. Iruka half-hearted muttered something in reply to his colleague as his thoughts drifted to the girl who had arrived late for his class, concluding that whatever was about to occur at the stadium had something to do with Toka missing the previous week in her new outfit. He just wondered what. Line break. Uchiha compound. Fugaku, for the first time in nearly 3 years, allowed himself to feel emotion as he silently wept, staring at the picture before him. In it was a beautiful woman and two equally beautiful twin teenage girls that all stood smiling as they hugged one another. The three of them had been what Itachi had truly taken from him the night of the massacre, and the three of them were Fugaku's reasons for what he planned to do. Soon he would get his revenge on Konoha and burn this village to the ground, reducing it to ash in the name of these three females who had owned his heart. But first he had to get stronger and set certain things in motion. Wiping away the tears from his face, Fugaku returned the picture in his office safe before making his way out the room towards the Chunin Stadium, intent on watching the spar involving a man he knew would no doubt play his enemy and stand between his goal of destroying Konoha. Having been informed by a scroll delivered by one of Danzo root agents of Naruto Uzumaki Senju's return and his impending spar that was to take place after the closing of the council meeting. Makoto, Fugaku said in surprise as he saw his wife for the first time since Itachi's birth wearing her Junin attire. What are you wearing? Fugaku asked, quick to hide his surprise as his expression turned stony. I'm returning to duty, Makoto simply said, adjusting her katana before swiftly making her way out of the house, leaving behind her angry husband. Fugaku growled as he watched his wife leaving, his Mangekyo Sharingan subconsciously activating as he thought of how his wife's impulsive decision to return to active duty would affect his plans for her. He needed her alive to use her as a tool to set up what he planned for the future, and with her out in the field there was risk of her getting herself killed. He would not allow this or settle for it. Makoto was to return home and rid herself of this ridiculous notion of being a ninja. Line break. Outside Chunin Exam Stadium, Makoto smiled as she appeared outside the stadium entrance via a Shunshin no Jutsu. It had felt good walking away from Fugaku the way she had it, and it had felt even better doing it in her ninja attire, having missed the feeling of power the standard Junin uniform and her katana gave her. She had told the Hokage of her plans to return to duty and her reasoning behind it after the ending of the council meeting, and Makoto had been pleasantly surprised when the third had said he approved of it, not bothering to question her further as he told her if she proved her ability in the spar she could commence missions the following week if the Uchiha woman was up for it. She had immediately told the Hokage she was and couldn't wait to have some time away from the village, away from a household where she felt unappreciated, but mostly away from Fugaku. But first she needed to win a spar, or at least try to. Line break. Inside Chunin Exam Stadium, Hiruzen sighed as he saw Makoto enter the stadium and join the four other ninja who stood in the center of arena. He knew allowing the Uchiha back into the ranks was a risky thing since he had initially planned to ban her and Fugaku from rejoining. But having seen how things had changed with Naruto's return, Hiruzen saw a perfect opportunity to better monitor the Uchiha that he had to take. He planned on discussing it with Naruto, but first he had to commence the announcement of his return and begin the spar. Looking around, Hiruzen felt satisfied with the outcome. It would seem just over 3/4 of the village had come, and he knew it was time to begin the spar and announcement. People of Konoha, Hiruzen began speaking in a loud chakra-laced voice as he stood at the front of the cage booth him, Toka and Tsunade currently occupied. The stadium instantly falling silent as the village leader began to speak. Several years ago during the Second Shinobi War, a man that I had the privilege of teaching was believed to have been killed by the hand of Hanzo the Salamander. Hiruzen continued, his tone remorseful as he noticed the somber air that filled the stadium. The man was none other than the Raion no Konoha, Naruto Uzumaki Senju of the Yanin. The man was however survived by his wife Tsunade Senju Uzumaki, his daughter Kushina Uzumaki Senju, and his granddaughter Toka Uzumaki Senju. Hiruzen announced as Tsunade and Toka made their way to stand next the Hokage in full display of everyone, a shocked silence befalling the entire stadium as everyone processed what they had heard and the implications behind the Hokage's words. Lies, that demon is not a Senju. A random civilian man who lost his 2 sons to the Kyuubi yelled, breaking the silence as the entire stadium broke out into chaos as civilians began to yell out both in anger and in protest whilst the shinobi sat silent, most having already suspect what the Hokage had announced. Silence, Hiruzen roared in a chakra-enhanced voice, causing the entire stadium to immediately fall dead quiet as he briefly glanced at an angry Tsunade who stood holding Toka's hand. Toka Uzumaki is in fact Toka Uzumaki Senju. Her heritage is part of the reason I called you all here. She is the granddaughter of Naruto and Tsunade Uzumaki Senju and is the daughter of Kushina Uzumaki Senju and the 4th Hokage Minato Namikaze. Hiruzen announced, pausing as a shocked silence filled the stadium at hearing exactly who this girl was. It's true, Tsunade spoke up from her spot next to Toka and Hiruzen, her voice traveling into the silence. Toka is mine and Naruto-kun's granddaughter. Tsunade confirmed, smiling at Toka as her words wiped away any doubt in the people's minds. Tomato is a Senju and the 4th's daughter. Ino thought in disbelief as she stared at the cage booth where Toka stood with the Hokage from where the blonde sat with her classmates. Demon. Shikamaru wondered from his seat next to Choji as he recalled what some of the villagers had yelled. He wasn't surprised by his friend's heritage, having always suspected it, as only 3 other people had ever had the rare violet eyes and red hair combo that his friend had, but demon, that had taken his interest. Him and Toka's other friends had always been aware of their friend's unfair treatment and had always wondered about the reason behind it. But hearing now that Toka was the 4th's daughter, Shikamaru believed he knew exactly why she was treated the way she was. Sighing, the Nara decided to ask his father later about it, deciding it was too troublesome to worry about it now. As I said earlier, people of Konoha, Toka Uzumaki Senju's heritage is part of the reason why I called you here today. Hiruzen continued speaking again, breaking everyone away from their thoughts about Toka as they turned their attention back to the Hokage. The second part of why I brought you here concerns the man I spoke to you earlier about and the fact that he, Naruto Uzumaki Senju, is in fact not dead. Hiruzen revealed, pausing as he heard the collective grasp of most of the stadium. The Yanin's return is the reason why I called all of you here, to witness a spar between the returned Raiyan no Konoha and the 5 shinobi before you. Hiruzen announced, gesturing at the center of the arena as the wind began to pick up dramatically, obscuring the spectators' view of the arena as it blew hordes of leaves and dust in every direction before gradually settling as it revealed very much alive Raiyan no Konoha towering proudly in his Senju armor as the entire stadium fell into a dead silence. Ojiazan is so cool, Dadbeo. Toka yelled, breaking the shocked silence that had settled over the stadium as several people including Naruto chuckled at the girl's beaming face. Toka? Naruto thought, fondly chuckling to himself as he smiled at the girl, thinking only she would say that. Naruto-sama, a shocked Chunin whispered, staring at his hero before him who was supposed to be dead. Raiyan no Konoha. Senju-sama. Other villagers around the man whispered amongst the chuckles, breaking out of their shock as they discussed with one another the impossible return of this man. Naruto-sama, Anko whispered in sultry tone, licking her lips before making her way forward with an obvious sway in her hips as she walked towards the divine man in front of her, not caring that she was in a stadium full of people as she thought of introducing herself to him. Anko, Kurenai whispered warningly, harshly yanking her friend's wrist as she stopped her from doing anything improper in a stadium full of people. What? Anko whined, trying to break her friend's tight grip. I was just going to say hi, Nai-chan. You can't go say hi in a stadium full of people, Anko, Kurenai warned in a low tone, knowing her friend wanted to do far more than say hi. Why? Because you wanted to be the one to, Anko teased. On, Kurenai stammered, causing Anko to laugh as the Genjutsu mistress cursed herself. She knew Anko was right, part of her wanted to be the one to say hi to the gorgeous man before her, as did the majority of the female population of the stadium if their blushes were anything to go by. Even Makoto Uchiha, much to Kurenai's surprise as she saw the fading red tinge that graced the cheeks of the Uchiha woman. Okay, Inoichi announced to gain the fighter's attention as he stepped forward into the arena, having seen the Hokages nodded to begin the spar since he had volunteered to protractor it during the council meeting. The rules of the spar between Naruto-sama and the 5 shinobi is no killing blows and no maiming. Inoichi announced, his eyes particularly falling on the Uzumaki Senju man who he knew would dominate the fight. Ready? Inoichi asked, getting a nod from Naruto, who calmly watched his opponents, and a nod from the 5 shinobi as Kakashi put away his book, immediately revealing his Sharingan as Makoto activated hers, unsheathing her katana as Guy, Anko and Kurenai got serious, all 5 of them knowing exactly who they were just about to fight.